I get a lot of questions about what's the difference between a first-time home buyer and a first-generation home buyer. And so I want to dive in and show you exactly what that means. So the first-time home buyer, everybody on the loan application must be a first-time home buyer. How do you determine if you're a first-time home buyer? It's actually pretty simple. It's only about where you've lived for the last 3 years. And so you got to take each person on the loan individually and think about or answer this question: have they lived in a home owned by themselves or their spouse anytime in the last 3 years? That's it. It's that simple. So if you're divorced and you lived in a house that your spouse owned 2 years ago prior to the divorce, you're not a first-time home buyer because you lived in a home owned by you or your spouse anytime in the last 3 years. Even if you're now buying without that spouse because you're divorced, you still lived in a home owned by you or your spouse sometime in the last 3 years. And you have to look at that individually for each person on the loan application. Now you say, wait, John, extra people on the loan application, does that mean I can have co-signers? Well, not really. So you can have extra people on the loan application as long as they're going to live in the property with you. And they all have to be first-time home buyers. So everybody on the loan has to be a first-time home buyer, and everybody on the loan has to live in the property, and everybody on the loan has to be on title, and nobody can be on title that isn't on the loan. And so if you have a spouse that you're like, hey, John, I want to buy without my spouse on the Dream for All program because their credit is low. They aren't working, so they aren't creating an issue for our qualification. I want them to be off of the loan. That's fine, but they also can't be an owner of the property. That creates an estate planning issue if something happens to you down the road. Now, what you can do, and there's a really tight loophole, but you can work with a trust attorney or a legal document specialist, and I know some great ones who can help you out, who will write a trust where you are the only owner of the trust. I'm not going to use the word beneficiary or trustee or trustor because I don't want to confuse you with the language, and I'm not an attorney, so I'm not giving legal advice. But you're the only owner of the trust, and your spouse only takes ownership and has control of the trust if you pass away. That's how you deal with that issue. But back to first-time home buyer, everybody has to be a first-time home buyer, and that is defined as each individual person having not lived in a home owned by themselves or their spouse anytime in the last 3 years. Then there's the first-generation home buyer. That's where it gets more confusing. So the first-generation home buyer looks at two things. The first part of that is only one person needs to be first generation, not everybody. So just one person on the application has to be first generation. And the rule is for the person who is first generation, they cannot have had their name on any property or mortgage anytime in the last 7 years. So it's from the date, not from today. Same thing with first-time home buyer. It's not from today. It's from the date that you get into contract. But from that date, looking back 7 years, you cannot have had your name on any property, primary home, investment property, co-signing for your parents adding you to their property in case they pass away, any of that. If your name is on property anytime in the last 7 years, you're not first generation. And that applies to every type of home except manufactured homes in a park. So if you owned a manufactured home in a park, that does not count towards this rule. And it's not just about your name being on title, it's about your name being anywhere related to the property, including just on the mortgage. That means so if you co-signed on a home equity line of credit for your sister, well, then your name was on a mortgage sometime in the last 7 years, you are not first generation. And then the second part of first generation is about your parents. Now there's three options three ways we look at the parent situation. Number one, are your parents both alive? If they are, then the question is, do they currently own a home in the United States? Okay, so if your parents are both alive, then the question is, do they currently own a home in the United States? If they do, either one of them, if their name is on title to any home, not their primary, any home, if they currently own a home in the United States, I'm reading here really quickly, present ownership in a home in the United States. So if they have ownership in any home in the United States, manufactured homes in a park don't count, then you are not a first generation home buyer because your parents are on title to a home. One of your parents are on title to a home. Now, if either or both of your parents have passed away, So you got to look at each parent individually and say, are they alive? Then are they entitled to a home right now? Hopefully the answer is no. Then if the parents are not alive, whether it's both or one or the other, you have to look back at the date they died. At the day they died, were they entitled to a home? And the answer has to be no in order for you to be first generation. So to recap, first generation means you have not owned a home anytime in the last 7 years or had your name on anything related to a home in the last 7 years. And your parents do not either own anything today or didn't own it the day they died. Now, there's a third scenario. So you have the parents living and the parents if they passed away. The third scenario is if you spent any time in foster care or institutional care. So I'm going to read this off my other screen. An individual who has at any time been placed in foster care or institutional care, type of out-of-home residential care for large groups of children by non-related caregivers. If you were ever in foster care or institutional care, then we don't care whether your parents own a home today or owned a home when they passed away. So you get a free pass regarding looking at your parents because you spent time in foster care or institutional care. I know there's a lot of pieces to that, but it really is simple. The one person, so you got to look at everybody on the loan application and say, I got to find one of us who is a first generation home buyer. And for that one person, they have to meet all of these rules. The first one about themselves, that I have not had my name on anything mortgage related in the last 7 years or home ownership related in the last 7 years. But that 7-year look back goes from the day you get into contract, which is going to be depending on if you get a voucher and when you get the voucher and the whole thing. And then the second part for that same person is that they have to look at their parents and say, first of all, if you spend any time in foster care or institutional care, then we don't care. But if you haven't, then we have to look at, did your parents own a home? Do they own a home now? Or if they're deceased, did they own a home the day that they died? That is really the most important piece of all of this. And you need to make sure that you meet those criteria because the state between when the voucher portal closes on March 16th and whenever they release the vouchers, part of that delay is they're doing background checks on the winners and the waitlisters to make sure you didn't lie about it. Okay. I don't know what their process is. I don't know how deep they look, but they want you to send information in when you register for the portal, and they want you to give information about your parents. Now, some people say, John, I don't know who my parents are, or I don't know who my parents are, and therefore they can't find them. Well, they're going to do their thing. That's why they have private investigators looking into it. And so this is really about determining right now, is this the right option for you? I am interviewing to be your loan officer, and I want to guide you through the process. Scan the QR code up above or click the link up above. You'll see webinars. You'll see the ability to book a call with me. You will see a link to start the application process. I am interviewing to be your lender, whether it's for this program or any lender, and I'm looking at any program, whether it's this program or any program. I do pretty much any loan program out there, and I hope to build your trust and to become your lender for life. Thanks for listening and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.